you have a very careful construction about the president not negotiating on the debt ceiling. The president will not negotiate over Congress's responsibility to pay its bills. Does that also not leave open the possibility that if Congress says, Mr. President, we are going to raise the debt ceiling, we'd like to discuss with you methods of achieving that, meaning not if, but how? Does that open a window for negotiations?
No, not in the sense that